What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. I'm Scott here with Michael and Drew, as always, and this is the Elder Scrolls podcast. Today we are talking about the Daedric prince, Peryite, the master of tasks and natural order, disease, pestilence. Let's get into it. Which one of you guys would like to start us off?
I mean, he's got an interesting sphere. Like, the things he has influence over, if you just look at it at face value, it doesn't really... You don't really see where it connects, like tasks and natural order. And then, also disease and pestilence and decay. And it's like, kind of like, he's not anything like Namira. Why is there that kind of crossover? But there is more to him. He's that prince who kind of just goes under the radar. He's, sits in your friend group but doesn't really say much. He's just there observing pretty much, But I think that's kind of Perryite's charm. And I mean, to say it early, I think he will be the prince we get the least info on ever, even when we do eventually get an Elder Scrolls 6.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think it's his mystery that makes him interesting in a way. And in Elder Scrolls Online, a lot of the stuff they did add about him outside of Reachman culture, which is a cool thing we'll talk about, is kind of like what you'd expect from a Namira cult group. Like, it is the very ooh, gross, disease, plague, or yes, I'll spread this illness. It's the blessing of Periite, which seems to be a common manifestation of his sphere in Tamriel, at least in the way mortals can understand it, because being the taskmaster, no matter how much of an important role it is, doesn't really have a physical presence. I don't think you'll find any mortals being I'm really good at making checklists and being organized and I worship Periite. That's a lot more boring if you think about it than anything to do with disease and pestilence.
I don't know why, I tend to associate him too with the natural order kind of thing, and it was associated with skeevers and spreading disease and stuff like that. But all of this kind of stuff could be functions of bringing a sort of natural balance to the state of nature of things, disease necessary and all of that. But I see it all as a function of his natural order rather than the checklist kind of stuff. It's a different kind of order. It's not the same sort of strict organization. I see it as order as in it brings balance. He brings
you're
checks.
You're 100% right. When I say checklist, I mean more the taskmaster element of his sphere, not the disease and pestilence, because outside of the disease and pestilence stuff, he is the one who keeps order in the lower planes of oblivion, I think the quote is. And there's one of those interviews, Lord Farnuit Hen and Tutor Reparius Answer Your Questions document, where he talks about how Periite is kept mighty busy with all the Daedrons and chaotic creation and things like that. So there seems to be two roles that he has. There's the natural order of the world, as you're talking about, and obviously you can guard against the hazards of overpopulation and abundance and expansion by bringing it back into balance, by sending a plague through and killing everyone. But then he also seems to have this Daedric realm influence, or importance at least, where he's doing stuff there that you'll never see, that has nothing to do with the natural order on Nirn, at least. I suppose what is natural anyway is ordering Daedric realms natural order. It becomes subjective, I suppose.
Well, that's why I think at least in my head, a natural, the definition of natural kind of, I see it as more of it is a check and balance to things. So therefore it still plays out rather naturally, like the environments, versus something as opposed to Jiggalag Supreme Order, which you can imagine is for conquest. It's this way. I'm making it this way. It's sort of a more gentle, I'm going to push things towards an order.
It is.
Well,
100% Sorry, you go.
Oh, no, you go. I was going to go on a bit of a spiel. So
I was just going to say, it is like that. The only strange thing is what constitutes natural order. Because if you were to think about it, a society expanding, quote, too much, I mean, I don't want to get into determinism, but it's if that was meant to happen, if that is the natural flow of cause and effect, why does Periite get to decide, this is too much, have a plague? Do you know what I mean?
I think the important thing about natural order is that in order for it to function properly, you kind of have to forget it's functioning at all. Yeah. His sphere in action is people living their daily life. To put it in from mortal perspective on Tamriel, it's people living their daily lives, not even thinking about him. And I think I almost tie that in with why he's one of the lesser known princes, because in order to be involved with natural order, so order that you're not actively putting onto people, you kind of need to put your ego to the side and operate behind the scenes. And I think the Daedric princes are all very egotistical, all of them. So it makes sense that he's also the taskmaster. I think that lines up perfectly, because there are certain things that the Daedra just wouldn't want to do. They wouldn't want to deal with mundane tasks. They're too busy trying to, conquer Tamriel or do something grand, whereas he's more than happy to kind of make sure everything works behind the scenes, and it kind of relies on him not having an ego, which is why I don't think he'll ever be outwardly kind of involved with mortals.
Yeah, it is interesting, because I've heard a few perspectives on Periite, like through reading different sources and stuff, and some of it implies like he's the taskmaster and doing this kind of low order Oblivion Realm stuff because he's the weakest, like he was kind of put in that position. I suppose I'm just questioning and wondering how much of it is his desire to do so, or because they're kind of like, oh, you're the HM bitch essentially of my Pokemon party, and you're gonna learn fly, surf, and cut and all this, because you're not useful for anything else, and he doesn't have a choice because they're all stronger than him, and so he gets delegated to that. I'm not saying that's 100% true. I'm just wondering if it's
kind of a chicken and egg. It's like, what came first? Did he get involved with tasks, or did he get put involved with tasks? Because if you imagine that he was just always doing that, since he kind of came into being as a spirit, if he was involved in the kind of mundane tasks, you can imagine the Daedra Lords, they're always going to look down on that and be like, look at this weakling, he's doing the dirty work that we don't want to do. But then again, if it ever came out that he was delegated that role, then definitely. But I guess we'd have to wait and see.
I suppose there is the Farnuit-Han, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it.
I've never known.
The scion of Boethia, basically. Actually, that's not even. No, this is actually Riparius, Tutor Riparius, in that document that answers. So I'll just read it. You mortals, so good at acquiring knowledge and so quick to learn the wrong lessons from it, allow me to misinterpret. That's a bit weird. Particles of chaotic creatia, when flowing in reaction to the exertion of will, become daedrons that, though injurious to the mortal form, can nonetheless perform work. Underutilized daedrons usually return to quiescence, but if imbued with sufficient purpose, they may escape and coalesce to form potentia vortices, I think it is. These are dangerous if allowed to self-optimize into realm rips. It's best to damp them out early. Trying to keep ahead of it all keeps Periite mighty busy, but nobody's really sorry for him. After all, he earned it. So when I hear that, I'm like, he earned it? Like, what does that mean?
So you can almost... it sounds like where that's going is that talking about daedrons and stuff like that, it's almost like he's involved with like the cellular level of kind of Oblivion existing, and even, all the realms of existence existing. And I don't know, that sounds like a really difficult job as opposed to one you give to your weakest, stupidest prince.
Or does it sound difficult because from a mortal perspective, but to the Daedra, he's actually just like their kind of like slave accountant, or he's like just, you know what I mean, doing everything behind the scenes that sounds super complex to mortals, but to them they're like, oh yeah, you deal with the daedrons, I don't want to deal with the daedrons.
Yeah, but like it sounds like what it says there in that quote is that if the daedrons are kind of left unchecked, then they can kind of manifest into ways that they weren't supposed to, or cause realm rips or whatever. It's like things can go really bad if someone's not keeping it. It's like, he's kind of performing the role of God in ensuring that everyone... I'm maybe giving him too much credit, but I'm just trying to understand it from he's not just kind of a weakling perspective. That it seems like almost the Daedra Lords are ignorant of like what makes up daedrons and how the world comes to be. All of that stuff.
Just to play devil's advocate, what if it's like being... Say it's like being a Daedra's advocate. Say it's like being a plumber, right? Like... respectable job. Somebody has to do it, but a lot of people wouldn't want to be a plumber because they don't want to get their hands dirty.
Yeah,
So
but then what's Boethia going to do with Trinimac after she shits out? You need that plumber.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean.
It can be a job that is really important, and we 100% need it, and the Daedra 100% need it to avoid the realm rips, or to avoid the plumbing breaking, so to speak. But nobody wants to do it. I don't know. I'm just I wouldn't be surprised.
I wonder what his relationship is actually with other Daedrics. I'll read this piece from like Reachfolk lore, but I have a little just an interesting idea. So, Reachfolk place greater emphasis upon natural rhythms and the pitiless march of time. Everything that exists will pass. The fort that rises too high will fall. The clan that starves will one day grow strong. This eternal balance is the work of Periite, the master of tasks and lord of order. In many ways, Periite serves as a vital foil to the primacy of conflict. While wars and plagues may inflict grievous wounds, the taskmaster ensures that the world always returns to its natural and intended state. So, obviously we're talking about like checks and balances and stuff like that before, a sort of natural order that's kind of like gently like pushing it back when there is sort of this abundance that kind of grows. But when it refers to the world as a natural intended state, like obviously in that context is talking about Nirn itself. But do you know how there's those old things about lore about Tamriel, why it was called Arena, because it's so dangerous and it's supposed to sort of be this realm of kind of, I guess, like conflict and potential. And even if you look at like Lorcan's design and in Reachman mythology, he sort of wanted this world that was like, had cruelty and but like challenge, and there was conflict, and there was like room for growth essentially. Whereas if you get to a state where you have like a civilization coming to ultimate abundance or ultimate control or something, you can kind of create sort of a utopia where there no longer is conflict. So what I'm sort of saying is the natural intended state, just Lorcan's sort of supported idea of just sort of a mortal world for challenge and growth and so on. So therefore like his kind of role in it is to kind of push things, like diseases and other things. Like it sort of says, I'll go on with the Reachman stuff. It says, as in the case with most cultures, Reachfolk associate Periite with blights and disease, but unlike other people, Reachfolk see no malevolence in illness. Quite the contrary. Lives extinguished by disease make room for healthier, more vibrant Reachfolk to take their place. Like wildfires, diseases serve as a revitalizing force of nature, a necessary check on the hazards of abundance. But like that kind of like interplay there, do you know what I mean? Like there was just interesting that it's sort of like the world's got to stay in this natural and intended state, and then his whole role is sort of a checks and balance to sort of maintain under. So like in my head I would be going like, the ideas of elven dominance or even dominance of man or anything, like it's kind of like preserving natural state of conflict, which is Mundus. So I sort of wonder what his, if there was any sort of like agreement between him and Lorcan in Reachman mythology perhaps. But do you know what I mean?
For sure. It is also interesting to consider that he's still a Daedric prince, and they all have their own motives, and they don't always keep to their sphere perfectly. For example, as one of his quests, he can just be like, "Go kill this vampire. I just hate him. He's just a person you would hate.
Yeah,
Go
sure.
slay him." It's like, you could be like, that's going against the maintaining intended order, because vampires are unnatural, but he's not like kill all vampires, kill all undead. That's not really his thing. I guess I agree with everything you're saying. I just find natural order extremely hard to pinpoint.
Well, that's why I just think calling it like natural order as in like how it works in real life, like with an evolution of natural selection, it's sort of like a check and balance, or there's this environmental sort of thing that changes them something, but it's not like a not malevolent necessarily, but a direct enforcement of order. Like he doesn't go click, extinct a race. He sort of suggests something against them. It's like, oh, this civilization's looking a little powerful. Let's give it a plague. And then you put the plague and then see what happens. And maybe it comes out on top, and then you could argue the result of, do you know what I mean?
Like it deserved to be strong because it overcame the plague. Like, yes.
Yeah.
You can see why he's tied sometimes to Akatosh. It's almost like, if you imagine Akatosh after creating time, which is natural order, in a sense, and fragments into all of these different beings, that one of them could have been a Daedric being that became separated from the creation of Nirn, and is still kind of upholding similar ideas. And I think that's why the Reachmen, of all of the Daedra or all of the Periite worshippers we've seen, they seem to be the only ones who really get it with the others, it's more of like I just left Hot Topic, kind of, got my Periite shirt.
I think that tends to be the cases with most Daedric princes that aren't talked about in sort of like a cultural context. Like, so there's in Reachman, they're a pantheon, they play a part. They've got a position within their sort of worship. Whereas if you go and same with like Azura and Khajiit mythology or Dunmer mythology, but if you take them by themselves, they just kind of get stripped down to like their most surface level things. So like, whenever you go to Azura, it's like, oh, I'm goddess of Twilight Dawn and so on, and like, oh, I'm vain and everything, and like that's what most of your quests or like single kind of cult interactions sort of end up being. Same as like, Mehrunes Dagon, you go to him and he's like, oh yes, revolution, destruction kind of stuff, but there's so much more to him. And when you see his place in contrast, it's like imagine reading a book and then taking a character from the book and then isolating them from everything else, all context, all other characters. Like most characters are built through their interactions and relationships with other things. And when you put a god into a pantheon like Periite in this, it gives them greater context and understanding. Like even here in Reachman mythology, they sort of argue that Periite functionally replaces the Akatosh in their sort of takes Akatosh's role of the sort of natural order, sort of a cyclical kind of thing, whereas you can't really get that insight necessarily outside of it. Do you know what I mean? Outside of that, because you can easily just reduce it to like, oh, disease and stuff. You know what I mean? Icky. So you can, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, it does make sense to have him kind of be. I mean, he's. I was going to say a more active version of Akatosh because he's Daedric, but he's obviously not really that active. But the passage of time for mortals is a disease, to put it very in a very grim way. So it's kind of you can see why he is associated.
Interesting too. It's like obviously I'm pretty sure I can't remember, but I think Reach Folk are the only ones that have him like sort of actively in a pantheon spot. Outside of that is like a Daedric cult. Like I don't think there's any. I can't think of him.
That sounds right.
Because it tends to be the most non-fleshed out Daedric princes are the ones in that kind of spot. The sort of same as like Vaemina or something like that, because they don't have a big role in any sort of culture. Oh, but Nymeria got more with Elsewhere.
Yeah, that's
with the
true.
Khajiit pantheon. She got fleshed a bit more. But like there's an example of one who used to not, but then did get fleshed out way more, and Amira's way more interesting now because she has a greater sort of role and understanding.
Sorry, I was just looking at his titles, and I really love the title "Lord of Abundant Pus and Bountiful Vomit." It's like, there's so much where it feels like mortals are very much just kind of guessing at what his intents are, and I even feel like with the Skyrim story of the kind of trying to spread this blessing, what is it called? It's not the blight, whatever they call that disease they're all spreading.
They're the afflicted, but for some reason the blight sounds really familiar.
Maybe they've I guess blight is a fairly catch-all term. But either way, I feel like they want something, and Periite's just like, yeah, whatever, just do this. It doesn't feel like it's his grand scheme that they're blessed to learn his inner workings. It's more just like they're construing his lessons and becoming disgusting as a result of it.
Yeah,
I mean, he does send this disease as a blessing to them. Like he views it as a blessing. Like there is a lot of stuff, even in Elder Scrolls Online, you read about them and they're like really honored to have some disease and their ear is falling off, but they're like really keen and they're like, oh, I hope I look good when I meet Zahn, the, what is it, Scale caller.
It's almost
but my nose
prank.
is falling off, but like, I hope I still look good. I'm embracing this whole disease thing. I don't know.
I feel like Periite's like, all right, if you want it, mate, you can rot. I'm not going to say no.
Well, there's a thing too, you could kind of argue that his sphere, like his greater purpose or anything, like disease as a function of sort of maintaining natural order and everything, is not really involved with mortals, individuals. Like there's a disconnect. Do you know what I mean? So for example, like with Boethia, there is a very like firm connect between, say, mortals' goals of like, all of the overcoming and stuff and like, revolution and whatnot, or with Mehrunes Dagon. Whereas there's nothing really that they can do outside of spreading disease, I guess. They can't really do much to really fulfill Perryite's greater sort of goals or purpose or anything. So they kind of, I can imagine they can actually just become, he might start these cults and it's like, yeah, it's a blessing, but he's kind of using them more so as just functions of spreading his checks and balances to order.
I wonder what you guys think about this, but you see connections. It's probably just people assuming that because it's a plague, it must be Periite. But some people say that the Thrasian plague that the Slode created to unleash on Tamriel may have been done, in collaboration with Periite. But to me, that almost feels like definitely not. It's the Slode going against the natural order because it threatened to wipe out the entire population of Nirn or the entire population of Tamriel, and that seems like too much.
We could try and work, because it ultimately succeeded in half the Tamriel's population. But, if we think about, what was even Tamriel at that time? there wasn't an active empire. I'm pretty sure the War of Righteousness happens after, I think, just after. Hold on, I'll just pull it up. But...
Yeah, what is it,
still,
First Era 220 or something?
Something like that. I just want to know if it was before or after, I forget. Yeah, the Slode's before it's 100 years before the War of Righteousness, the Thrasian Plague.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that's so I guess you could say, there's the Elysian Empire but that's not even that big. The Elysian Empire was never that big. So there's not there's any sort of dominant reasoning for that. So for example, if there is some continent spreading Septim Empire and it's everything's under this one big thumb, you could argue then maybe setting a Thrasian Plague for via Periite or something. It's in his interest to check the power of the Septim Empire and bring natural order or something. But I think at this time it's relatively, there's a fair bit of conflict going on and different individual groups all around. I don't know, if anything, the Thrasian Plague unites them all and brings them together for a bit. I don't know.
I like there's a piece called Tallinger the Artificer Answers Your Questions Too, and basically gets asked about the Thrasian Plague and Periite and Namira. And basically the answer is, yeah, it could be because they're involved with pestilence and so on. But then there's also the pestilent progeny thesis of that reprobate Divath fear, which postulates that the infectious slugs that invaded Tamriel were mutated versions of the Slode's own infantile larvae. So, I don't know. It just sounds very Slody to me.
Yeah, I agree. I feel what about, let's pick the other, let's just discuss it because it's there, is the Nahartan flu, the other big significant flu of the Elder Scrolls timeline.
You never know, but there's actually a quest in the Elder Scrolls Online where there's a cult of Periite who, in Orcrest, where the flu is causing issues, and they want proof that it is Periite. They're really trying to claim it. They're trying to claim this one for Periite, and they're going in trying to find anything they can, and they find some proof, but it's very questionable. And to me, it seems kind of hinted at that it's there's not the strongest connection, and if Periite's followers want to claim it, they're only going to push it.
Plus, the Argonians have no connection really to anyone other than the Hist anyway. So this shaman who created it, he had his own motives that don't seem to be linked in any way to Periite.
Well, remember, that's just a theory too.
Is it not? Oh, okay.
You pushing your Argonian hating agenda.
But it makes so much sense. I don't know. To me,
but
it makes heaps of sense. These Argonians would just make a disease spot on. Says.
But I guess too, kind of what you were saying before about the lack of ego and the sort of things. I don't know if it's necessarily in Periite's best interest, even if he did play a part in any of these things, to sort of claim it. And while his followers, who are their egos are invested in the worship of Periite and it's part of their identity, they may want to we've got to claim it, of course it was him kind of thing. Even if it was Periite's thing, he might really be just behind the scenes doing his natural order thing. It's not necessarily for him to do his job effectively, because then guess what, ultimately, if he was responsible for a lot of these things, you could argue that he would be an enemy of a lot more people, and he would be a lot more known in other pantheons and so on, and sort of known by other cultures as a bad figure.
But you can't really you can't spot natural order as his work. There's no clue. Do you know what I mean? It's He could have done it without using followers, without leaving evidence. And it even says, like, you know, people think it's natural order. There's the Argonian shaman theory, but it's quite popular to just think it was a natural cause disease, kind of something that just happened. So it kind of makes me think, if there's no distinction between a naturally caused disease and the work of Periite upholding natural order, you just can't know. But you can't credit him or discredit him either. And it gets a bit fuzzy, because if all natural order is the work of Periite, like, look at other spheres that Daedric princes have. If I'm a Imperial living in Cyrodiil and I'm extremely ambitious and I want to have the best, I don't know, jewelry store in the market district, and I'm like hyper ambitious, am I operating in the sphere of Mehrunes Dagon? Like, not really. You know, but it gets fuzzy, because then you can just look at everything involved in natural order and say this is all the work of Periite. Perhaps a lot of it is. It's hard to know who has claim over what. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I don't know if it's necessarily like the gods have like claims over every single functioning that goes on, but it's kind of like invoking them to accomplish things. Like, you know, if you're like invoking Mehrunes Dagon, like they're kind of just like personifications, I guess, like metaphysical personifications of things that the, you know, mortals experience and so on. Kind of like,
I can imagine that, you know, jewelry shop trader, if he were to be very ambitious about making his jewelry store work and wanted to work with Mehrunes Dagon, if he started burning down every other jewelry store in the Imperial City, then you'd know that maybe he's had some connection. But yeah, I guess it depends on the approach.
But, you know, it also could. Who knows the exact workings of the Daedra? But going back to the Nahartan flu, you just can't tell.
Yeah, for sure, I agree. Tell. But what I was just trying to say before is just like, I don't think it's even in his interest to claim them necessarily. Like, he's not like the kind of... He doesn't seem like... He's low key, if you describe it out of the Daedric Prince. It's like all of his stuff. He's not going around. It's like, yes, I slew Trinomac and I shat him out. I did, you know what I mean? Or he's not like claiming all of these great endeavors. Or I'm not trying to conquer Tamriel. Or,
I guess with the exception of the Nahartan flu, you've kind of the few times a major like pestilence has spread across Tamriel, it's always kind of been involved with a figure who's got a clear motive. So with the exception of the Nahartan flu, you got, you know, the Thrashing Plague, the Slowed. You can see why they would want to do it, and then the Blight as well. You wouldn't associate Dagothar's divine disease with Periite, because the reasons for him unleashing it on Morrowind are really clear cut. So I guess it's just kind of the absence of just general widespread diseases in Tamriel kind of makes it hard to distinguish his involvement at all.
I mean, here's something interesting to kind of add to the idea that maybe he was responsible. It's one of the scraps of evidence you find in the Elder Scrolls Online, and it's definitely not like a all-answering document, but it's a letter to Periite from a Daedric worshipper. It says, "Thank you, Periite. I know you will never read this, but I need to thank you in writing for listening to my prayers. This letter is written to you, but it is not for you. This letter is for all the non-believers, the doubters, the ones who scoffed when I told them the old gods would wash away their evil. I prayed to every Daedric prince, but you were the one who answered, the one who saw that the only way to fix this city was to kill it from within and burn it to the ground. Even as the flu spreads through my body and the blood flows from my mouth, a smile crosses my face and a single phrase circles my fevered mind. Thank you, Periite." But it's kind of like, I pray to every Daedric prince to kill this city from the inside out, and then eventually a disease comes. And I'm like, oh, it was Periite. Thanks. You know what I mean? It just doesn't...
Well, it's good to know even he gets fan mail, despite being the least known Daedric prince. So I'm happy for him.
You've been waiting to say that the whole time I was speaking. The second I said, I know you'll never read this.
I thought it was a valuable contribution.
It was. Yeah, he is interesting. I mean, we can look a bit more at Skyrim if you want to. I like Kesh the Clean's quote. He is the pus in the wound. Oh, proper ones curl their noses, but it's pus that drinks foul humours and restores the blood. I worship Periite, yes, because sometimes the world can only be cleansed by disease.
What do you reckon?
It's kind of thing the Joker would say, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know how there was the whole like the Redfall trademark, and people were like speculating like that it could be some sort of like big plague disease from Peryites kind of thing set in Hammerfell or something. Like, I don't know. Or like, there was plenty of different theories around, because it had to do with like, you know, the afflicted were like, they were coming from High Rock or something, or maybe it could have been like a similar. It was some. I forgot the exact piece of evidence.
Well, their skin
Probably
is
not
tinged
much.
red a bit, and they have a disease, but that feels very weak to me.
I also think too, like, look, I don't know why. I just feel because of like the sensitivity of world events.
I was gonna say that.
I just feel like they're not.
Imagine it was their
the
plan, and now they have to change it, or they're like, we'll delay it. We'll delay it for 4 more years, so it doesn't feel like too soon.
It'd affect the social dynamic in dealing with NPCs. Like, would everyone be wearing masks and staying away from each other, and you're trying to start a quest or something?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, could be a bit weird.
Yeah. I also feel like having to like combat a plague or a huge plague is kind of like, I don't know, counterintuitive to sort of exploration and like going into different cities and talking to people and everything like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You just work on a cure in a lab the whole game.
I mean, the Nahartan flu was active during the Elder Scrolls Online, and that doesn't feel like it. It just...
But it was fading, wasn't it, at that time? Wasn't it?
I don't know.
Because it was kind of before, I thought.
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll pull up the timeline just to...
I mean, it's still... I know it's still there. Like, it's definitely a thing.
Yeah, because there were still remnants of the Kothringi during the time of ESO, and almost all of them got wiped out, except for the ones who escaped on the Crimson ship.
Lasted
I guess it's still going on.
Lasted 43 years from 560 to 603, and Elder Scrolls...
43 years.
Yeah. That's what I mean. So
I hope ours doesn't last that long.
No. I hope so as well. Something interesting, actually, with Perryite's motives... If you look at the Only Cure quest, things do get pretty vague. Like, a lot of people extrapolating and making sense of that quest actually comes from a document that's found in like the test cell's Dreamworld area of the game called Unsent Afflicted Letter, but it's not something that you actually pick up, I'm pretty sure. Because he says, basically Periite says, I sent this blessing, a plague, that infected a scattering of Breton villages. One of my monks, the elf Orchendor, was sent to gather these afflicted. He shepherded them into Bethardums for me, but has since lost his way. That's what you hear. He's since lost his way. I'll not stand for betrayal. I want you to go there and kill him in my name. And then when you say, why does Orchendor deserve to die? Periite just goes, an impertinent question. The elf must die. Either carry out my will or do not. You are not the only mortal agent I could choose. So you don't get like a massive answer about it all. If you ask what will become of the afflicted, he will say, did you leave any alive? The afflicted are mere vessels. That's it. Mere vessels for my blessing. It will spread to others through their touch and my own. Another overseer will replace Orchendor when the time comes. For now, all is cleansed and ordered. And of course you get Spellbreaker, but there's not a whole lot of information there. And you can, when you do that quest, you can hear the afflicted have dialogue about how they regret, some of them regret leaving High Rock, and how Orchendor promised them that they would be communing with Periite, and they're not, and they haven't heard Periite, and you know what I mean? Like there's this kind of stuff. If you look at the Unsent Afflicted Letter, which is probably too long to read, it talks about them leaving a place called, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's like Kul Alu, place in High Rock. Anyway, so there's this illness, and they all get sick, and then Orchendor comes, and he's not like scared of their sickness, so he comes in like this monk and eats with them and speaks with them and learns all their names, even though they have a disease, and isn't afraid of that. Basically treats them like respectable humans despite them being afflicted. And then he basically explains that it's not a curse on their village, it's a beacon which drew him to them, and that he serves Periite, and that they all have to go with him. And it actually mentions that they'd killed some Daedra worshippers before. Like, we burned Dina and Lucas not 3 years before, after all. Kul Alu would never suffer the heresies of a Daedra worshipper in our midst, yet we did. Not only that, but we rapidly heard what he had to say. Maybe you think we were too sick, too weak, but we weren't. So he apologizes for their dead, and takes them away. Some were carried in carts and litters, but all made the trek with Orchendor across the border into Skyrim. leaving their old village, a empty, haunted place. And so they live in this ancient dwarven city. But it also says, which is interesting, other afflicted live with us, many with similar tales to that of Kul Alu, or Kul Alo. So they're not all just from the one place. There's and again, this, I don't know if this is technically lore friendly, because this book is found in the Test Cell's Dreamworld area, which is a place you go with console commands. But still, like, there's this whole thing which they cut for whatever reason. So it's like, I am now an apostle of the afflicted, tasked to disseminate the teachings of Periite to our afflicted. So yeah, it's interesting extra lore dump.
Periite sucks.
Kind of lore. Huh?
I said Periite sucks. Like, I wouldn't want to.
Especially, like I said, like, in Elder Scrolls Online, you hear people and they're all like, "Yes, I'm rotting and dying, but I love it." Like, you know.
Like, I also have like you know, it just feels like you're just a mere vessel for him, and not. And you arguably it's the same for plenty of other Daedric princes. But there's also ones that kind of have direct benefits to your life, whether how dark or evil that could be. But it's like, you know, if you are you know, invoking Mehrunes Dagon, and you know, it helps you in your conquests and your ambition or something. Like, you know, arguably what you could be doing is really cruel and so on, but like, you are at least getting some sort of benefit from, like, you know, worshipping Dagon versus just getting a disease or getting leprosy or something.
Yeah, I know.
God.
I've heard themes out there, like, kind of like, imagine living forever, but you have a disease, but you're immortal. They're just vibes, though. Wouldn't be counting on that.
Corpus.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be counting on it. I mean, let's be real. His biggest achievement is creating the dragon frog, and you two don't know what the dragon frog is.
Yeah, it's that little frog in Hughes Bane.
Viridescent dragon frog. Play a pet. Elder Scrolls Online.
Oh, okay. I was wondering why I had something missing from my lore. That's cool.
I'll read you the quote. A tale says these green frogs grew as large as dragons, but envied the dragons and their wings. One packed with Periite later, and they gained their wings but lost their size. So best not to make pacts with Periite, yet they are amusing companions. Looks sick, looks cute. I want one.
Yeah.
That is cool.
I mean,
very cool.
I'm not about, like, the whole Elder Scrolls Online meme magic stuff. I just think it's a cute frog. Don't need to see it in Elder Scrolls 6, though.
How many crowns?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Another interesting thing I suppose we could talk about is Perryite's realm. The pits. It's a very obscure kind of realm. No one really knows much about it. Just says here, Periite guards the lowest orders of Oblivion. Now...
I know US has got it as that...
I have a bone to pick with anyone saying it's the Deadlands. It might be. Now, we all know Oblivion used, like, Mehrunes Dagon's Oblivion realm assets to do other things with Daedra, because, let's be real, they weren't bothered to make other assets. But if you actually look at Perryite's quest in Oblivion, it's about his followers their souls get trapped when they try to summon him, which is just ridiculous, because if they were good followers, they should know how it all works. But anyway, their souls get trapped in Oblivion, and you're sent to go track them down and free their souls for him, because they're all just immobilized around his shrine. But his quote is, "I will transport you to the plane of Oblivion in which they are trapped." He doesn't say, "I'm sending you to the pits, this is my realm." So it could be
just to
his
be an
realm.
annoying devil's advocate too. Like, couldn't you say too? It's like, what's if they try to summon him, but their souls got stuck in Oblivion? Like, wouldn't you? If it's the name of the thing in the maps or whatever, and so it's called Perryite's realm. But with that knowledge and the idea that they're trying to summon him, that maybe they sort of did some reverse stupid shit and put their soul in his realm or something.
They could have. Like, that's the
it.
idea. I'm not... let me clarify. I'm not saying someone is wrong or silly for thinking that it is his realm. But look, when I look at it, he was really like, "I'll transport you to the plane of Oblivion in which they are trapped." Unless his realm has multiple planes and one of them looks like that, then that's fine. Because you know how there's different pocket realms and things like that. That's totally a possibility. Yeah. It's just a carbon copy It is literally a carbon copy of Mehrunes Dagon's realm with the tower. No, but even like the towers and like the whole.
Yeah, it's the same with Boethius.
At least
when you do the 10
Boethius has
tournaments.
a statue.
If it helps sway the scales, it does explicitly say, which I know doesn't mean much, but in the Imperial Census, it does say it's completely inaccessible to mortals.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was probably written before the time of Oblivion anyway, so you could still make the argument that it is his realm, but
at the end of the day, I don't like the in-game interpretation of some things. Like, you don't like I wouldn't use this as like, wait, Perryite's realm looked like this. Like, I don't think anyone would be disappointed if the pits was like some awesome pestilence.
That's my point. That's my
themed.
point. It's like if there's an Elder Scrolls 6 quest, or at all, if there's an Elder Scrolls 6, if there's a quest where you can go to Perryite's realm, the pits, and it doesn't look like that, that's perfectly fine and makes sense to me. I would say that's lore friendly. I wouldn't be like, no, you know.
Yeah, you could also say even just but the lowest orders of Oblivion, you could assume that like maybe the pits is inaccessible, and then this is just one of his various orders. Like if you like different little Oblivion realms that he's sort of maintaining.
Yeah,
and
perhaps
doing
that's his little side office for Mehrunes Dagon when he's like doing the cleaning duties of that realm. You know what I'm saying?
Like how we've just sort of reduced him to like a janitor. Like,
but maybe he is. It's cool. It is cool to like make Daedric princes sound more powerful. Perhaps they're like way more interesting and important. And I guess they all are when you look into them. There's always more to learn about the Daedra, but it could just be, he is kind of like their janitor. Like it's not a,
but like an
cool
intelligent, he's like the Goodwill Hunting kind of like smart janitor who knows what he's doing, but he's the janitor.
Yeah, it's like he's just been put in charge of that. You know, he's a small fish in a big pond, despite that pond being bigger than all the ponds that mortals will ever be in.
I'm not sure if we've done this before, but have we even like? I know we've ranked princes on the podcast in terms of like just subjective appeal to us, but like, is it even? Oh no, we did. We did do a strongest Daedric prince a while back. Yeah, as well back. I wonder if any of that might have changed now. Just because there's been a lot of lore since we did that coming out for ESO and so on, and different perspectives. Like that video was done prior to the Elsewhere Pantheon stuff, the Reachfolk Pantheon, even some of the, even before Namira was associated with the Void, really. So it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'll just read you some massive Periite follower cope that I just wanted to get the actual quote, but it's like, of course I do not question Lord Perryite's will. I do not. He knows I have been loyal, faithful. I see the visions of his ordered world, and I revel in it, a land filled with corpses, rotting, resplendent. A new age shall come, a new order will come, all under my lord's banner. Mother will regret the day she spurned me. I wish to keep recording, of course, but it's getting a bit trickier to write since my third finger fell off. Like, okay. Doesn't sound good. Doesn't, it's not very cool.
Yeah, he's projecting his mummy issues onto Periite a bit there.
Yeah, tends to be deadly in the Elder Scrolls world. I mean, just take a look at the Dark Brotherhood questline in Oblivion, Not good. Yeah. Should we talk a bit about his artifacts? So he's got Spellbreaker, his only artifact, I should say. He's one artifact.
The other thing too is it's not even really like his artifact. It's another one of those cases where it's like made by dwarves and stuff.
I mean, it's an artifact that he's claimed. It's like Volendrung is a Dwemer thing. I know that it's been repurposed.
What I'm trying to say is that there is no cool story or necessarily like direct connection to them. It's just a cool thing that they've taken from somewhere and given to someone else.
It's
like it's not like the ebony blade or something that's perhaps like, although isn't.
Anyway, it's a shield.
It
was a shield made for King Rorken in the battle with against Shalador.
Yeah, when they were going to.
And he always gives it to you as a quest reward. And it reflects magic. It depends on the game. It can protect from reflect magic or dispel curses or
it's essentially an anti-magic shield.
Yeah. Like it has a few manifestations, but that's that.
Yeah, I think that's about it for Perry.
To be honest, I think we did a fairly good job. I liked this episode. I think that's as much as you can extrapolate from Periite as humanly possible.
I'm surprised we went more than 10 minutes. It's like we don't know that much about him, really.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back next time, and have a good day.
See you later. All right.